They say bullies thrive until someone finally pushes back. And for years, one HOA board member ruled her block like a tyrant. But one night a homeowner trapped her car inside his garage and turned the entire street against her. Picture this: Thomas Green, a 42-year-old project manager, crawling through Dallas traffic for nearly an hour, head buzzing from back-to-back meetings, eager to pull into his garage and collapse on his couch. He hit the opener. The garage door creaked upward, and his evening spun in a way he could never have predicted, because sitting inside his garage was a spotless white SUV angled like it owned the place. At first he thought maybe it was a delivery, mix-up, maybe a friend in an emergency, but one look at the Texas plates and the vanity tag, HOAPWR, told him exactly who it belonged to. Patricia Vaughn, the clipboard-wielding woman who ran their HOA like her own personal kingdom. He killed his engine, climbed out, and stood in silence. This was his sanctuary, his workshop, his storage, his domain, and seeing her vehicle sitting in the middle of it felt like an invasion. Moments later, her voice floated from the driveway, bright as ever. "Oh, Thomas, you're home sooner than I thought." She strolled up in a floral blouse, folder tucked under her arm, looking like she was headed to another HOA hearing. Thomas's voice was low and controlled. "Patricia, what is your car doing in my garage?" She tilted her head with zero shame. "I just needed the space for a few minutes. Landscapers were blocking my driveway. I couldn't be late for a board call. You don't mind, do you?" He laughed once, bitter and sharp. "You parked inside my garage, do you hear yourself?" She waved him off like brushing a leaf. "Don't exaggerate. It's just for a moment. You're reasonable. Everyone knows that." But Thomas had heard too many stories. Neighbors fined for late trash cans, berated for holiday lights, kids scolded for basketball. He stepped closer. "You broke into my garage, Patricia. That's trespassing." For the first time, her smile cracked, but instead of apologizing, she told him not to create drama. Thomas had enough. He pulled out his phone, pressed the app, and the heavy garage door began sliding down with a grinding motor that sounded like a verdict. Patricia's head whipped around. "Wait, what are you doing?" He met her eyes as the door sealed her, SUV inside, making sure your few minutes stay right where they belong. Her jaw dropped. "You can't do that." "Watch me," Thomas said, and for the first time she didn't have a quick comeback. She demanded he open the door, but he stood firm. Soon neighbors began drifting out. Janice from across the street, the Murphys with their twins, Robert from his workshop. Patricia shouted to them, "He's got my car trapped in his garage." Janice frowned. What was it doing in there to begin with? Patricia stammered something about tight parking, but the eyebrows rising around her said, "It all." The whispers about Patricia's overreach were turning into open stares. Robert asked how she'd even gotten inside since Thomas's garage had a keypad. She flushed and admitted she might have seen him type the code once. Gasps spread through the group. Thomas said evenly, "So not only did you trespass, but you admitted to using a code you had no right to know." Patricia tried to regain footing, claimed this was harassment, but Janice shot back, "You're the one who broke into his garage." Laughter rippled. Patricia grew shrill, accusing Thomas of hostility, but he leaned against his truck calm and steady. Hostility is forcing yourself into someone else's home and acting like it's your right. The crowd thickened, murmurs growing. Patricia insisted she had kept property values high, made sacrifices, but Thomas countered, "This isn't your HOA playground. This is my home." Janice cut her down again, reminding everyone that respect for a neighbor's property was the most basic rule of all. Patricia's defenses wobbled as Robert declared it plain common sense. You don't steal someone's code and waltz into their garage. Patricia shrieked she didn't steal. She just borrowed an opportunity. That line broke whatever restraint the neighbors had left, laughter scattering through the group. For years they'd been fined, warned, and belittled, but tonight Patricia was on the defensive. Her last refuge was bluster. She threatened to call the police. Thomas said calmly, "Go ahead, because the moment you do, you'll have to admit how your car ended up in there." Silence dropped. Neighbors smirking. She couldn't make the call. Sophia, a young mother, told her flat out, "Nobody forced you to park in Thomas's garage. You did that yourself." Even Mr. Douglas, the old veteran down the street, shuffled out and said with a voice like gravel, "I fought overseas so people could have their property respected. You crossed the line, plain and simple." That weight settled over everyone. Patricia tried one last attack, bringing up Thomas's Christmas lights from last winter, but he explained he'd left them up because his father was in the hospital. Gasps again, sympathy shifting toward him. Janice crossed her arms and said, "Rules don't excuse cruelty." The crowd wasn't just watching anymore. They were remembering every letter, every petty fine, every overstep. Patricia's SUV wasn't just stuck in a garage, it was stuck in their collective memory of her control. And with every word, every laugh, every nod, Patricia's grip on the neighborhood slipped further away. "I've been here 15 years, Thomas said, and I've watched Patricia hand out violations like candy. You can't leave a trash can out for 10 minutes without a warning. She even fined me for working on my car in my own driveway." Sophia jumped, and she tried to fine us for chalk drawings on the sidewalk. My kids were 5. Neighbors murmured, some laughing at the absurdity. Patricia's voice cut sharp. "Listen to yourselves. I've been protecting this neighborhood. Without me, you'd have overgrown lawns, broken fences, riffraff moving in." Thomas raised his voice steady. "Protecting doesn't mean bullying. You've been harassing everyone here for years, and tonight you pushed it too far." The group went still. Then Harold Chen, who rarely spoke, stepped forward. "Thomas is right. You've acted like the HOA is your personal throne, Patricia, and tonight you got caught. Nobody's rushing to defend you." Patricia's face paled. "You think ganging up makes you right?" Thomas's voice stayed calm. "It's not ganging up, it's truth. Everyone's seeing it with their own eyes." Patricia clutched her phone like a weapon. "If you don't open that garage, I'll have police here in 10 minutes. They'll be arresting you for theft of my vehicle." Neighbors stirred. Thomas stepped closer. "Let's play it out. You call them, and what do you tell them? That you broke into my garage with a code you shouldn't have, parked your car inside and got upset when I closed the door. You think they'll see me as the criminal?" Patricia's lips trembled, but she snapped back. "They'll see a man humiliating a woman." Janice Fuller laughed from the porch. "No, they'll see a woman who thought she owned the block and finally got called out." Laughter rippled. Patricia's face flushed red. "You think this is funny?" Thomas shook his head. "It's sad. Sad you've spent so much time policing lives. You forgot the simplest rule. Respect. You don't respect anyone." The crowd clapped. Patricia's voice cracked. "You're all ungrateful. Without me, this place would be a disaster." Robert Martinez stepped forward. "We don't need a dictator. We need a neighbor." Sophia held her toddler close. "When I moved here, I thought the street was safe and welcoming. But the hardest part wasn't traffic or taxes, it was you. And everyone's tired of pretending otherwise." Her words landed heavy. Patricia blinked fast, refusing tears. "Thomas, please," she pleaded. "Just open the garage, let me take my car and go." Thomas shook his head. "Not until you admit this isn't your block to control." Murmurs spread. Harold spoke again. "Maybe it's time we rethink who's running this HOA." Whispers turned into nods. Patricia's face drained. "You can't replace me. I was elected." "Then we'll hold another election," Janice shot back. The idea lit like a spark. Neighbors straightened, energized. Patricia raised her hands desperately. "Without me, property values will plummet." Mr. Douglas leaned on his cane. "I'd rather lose 10% than lose peace of mind." The crowd agreed. Patricia's chest rose and fell, her voice breaking. "You're making a mistake." Janice's reply cut clean. "No, Patricia. We'll finally breathe without you." Then the faint sound of sirens sliced through the night. Heads turned. Patricia shifted, nervously. Thomas stood steady, arms folded, waiting. A cruiser rolled up, Lights flashing. Two officers stepped out, Lewis and Moore. "Evening, folks," Lewis said. "Got a call about a vehicle dispute." Patricia leapt in. "Thank goodness you're here. He's locked my car in his garage. That's theft." Moore asked how her car ended up inside. She faltered. I parked it there because my driveway was blocked." Thomas raised his voice. "She used my garage code without permission. When I found her SUV inside, I shut the door." Officer Lewis rubbed his jaw. "Ma'am, is that true?" Patricia stiffened. "It's not as bad as he says. I knew he wouldn't mind. I'm on the HOA board. I've always looked out for this community." Janice cut her down. "For yourself, you mean?" Neighbors shouted their stories. Fines for oil changes, chalk drawings, Halloween decorations. The officers exchanged a look. Lewis stepped closer. "Ma'am, entering property without permission is trespassing. If you used his code, that's unauthorized entry." Patricia's face drained. "No, I was just trying to solve a problem." Thomas laughed bitterly and created a bigger one. Officer Moore turned to Thomas. "Do you want to press charges?" Silence hit heavy. Patricia's eyes widened. "Charges? We're neighbors. You wouldn't." Thomas thought of every fine, every threat, every moment of being watched in his own home. Finally, he said, "I haven't decided yet. But I do know this. I'm not lifting that door until you admit what you did in front of everyone." Patricia's mouth opened, then closed. The officers stood firm. The crowd leaned in. Her pride and fear clashed in the glow of red and blue. And in that stillness, everyone knew the night wasn't finished. "You didn't share responsibility tonight, Patricia. You stole my space. You invaded my home." The crowd murmured in agreement, quiet nods spreading even among those who had stayed silent. Officer Moore scribbled notes, reminding her calmly, "Ma'am, homeowners associations don't override private property rights. No bylaw allows you to use someone's garage without permission." Patricia's face went red. "So now I'm a criminal after all I've done?" From a porch, Janice Fuller chuckled. "No, Patricia, you're just finally being treated like the rest of us." Laughter rippled through the group, sharp but honest. Patricia's head snapped toward them, her eyes glassy with panic. "Stop laughing. Don't you see what's happening? He's humiliating me and you're letting him." Thomas looked at the officers. "You see, this isn't about rules. It's about control. She can't stand being wrong in front of people." Officer Lewis nodded slightly. "It does appear to be less about a misunderstanding and more about an abuse of trust." The word abuse hit her like a slap. Her shoulders shook, and, for a moment it seemed she might break down. But pride kept her standing. "Fine," she hissed, trembling. "I'll sue the HOA, I'll sue Thomas, I'll sue anyone who smears my reputation." Robert Martinez laughed. "Oh, Patricia, you've been smearing your own reputation for years. Tonight just made it obvious." Neighbors clapped softly, some smiling for the first time. Patricia's chest heaved as she turned to the officers. "You can't just let him keep my car locked in there. That's illegal." Officer Moore shook her head. "Actually, it isn't. The vehicle is on his property, behind his locked garage. He hasn't touched it. You put it there without consent. The trespass began with you." Patricia staggered, her phone slipping in her hand. The law wasn't protecting her tonight. Stripped of her usual power, she was just another resident caught breaking the rules. Thomas exhaled, turning to the officers. "I'm not pressing charges, but I want her to admit what she did out loud. Otherwise, she'll pretend nothing happened." Patricia shook her head violently. "No, I won't." From the edge of the group, Sophia Reynolds raised her voice, her toddler asleep on her shoulder. "Patricia, this isn't about what you won't do. It's about what you should do. You've demanded apologies from us for years. Maybe it's time you learned what one feels like." The crowd stirred, louder this time, faces closing in like invisible walls. Officer Lewis sighed. "Ma'am, an apology could go a long way here. Right now, you're only making things worse." Patricia faltered. Silence stretched. Finally, she whispered, "I'm sorry." Thomas shook his head. Louder, so everyone hears. Her eyes burned, but she forced the words out. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have parked in your garage. I shouldn't have used your code. Applause rolled through the crowd. Not admiration, but relief that the self-appointed queen of the HOA had bowed her head. Patricia looked crushed, her pride scattered in pieces. The officers gave Thomas a nod, but he knew this wasn't finished. Tomorrow could bring another fight. Still, the neighbors' energy had shifted. For the first time in years, they weren't divided. They were united. Robert Martinez suddenly called out, "She doesn't just get to drive off like nothing happened. We need to talk about what this means." Others agreed. Janice Fuller stepped forward. "If we let her walk away, tomorrow she'll spin this against Thomas." She apologized because she had to, not because she meant it. Even quiet neighbors added their voices. "It's time for change," Harold Chen said firmly. Thomas looked around, surprised by the unity. If everyone feels this way, maybe it's time for a real meeting. Not one Patricia controls in the clubhouse, but one right here. Patricia's eyes widened in horror. "You can't just overthrow the board in a driveway." Janice smirked. "Funny, you had no problem running HOA business from your living room." Laughter bubbled louder. Officer Lewis spoke gently. "Ma'am, whether or not they can change leadership tonight isn't our call. But you've lost the trust of your neighbors, and trust is harder to win back than any fine you've handed out." Patricia's shoulders slumped. Thomas seized the moment. "We'll call a special election. Gather signatures. Patricia will have her chance to defend herself, and the rest of us will decide if we want better." Cheers erupted, echoing down the street. Patricia muttered, "This isn't happening." But it was. The balance of power had shifted, not in a boardroom, but in a driveway. She yanked open her SUV door, slid inside, and started the engine. As she reversed, Thomas stepped close and said quietly, "You can leave tonight, Patricia, but tomorrow this street won't be the same. The days of you controlling people are over." She drove away in silence, her neighbors parting like a sea, no one waving, no one smiling. The officers departed, and voices immediately rose again, plans, signatures, change in the air. For the first time in years, the street felt like a community. People who rarely spoke were now sharing stories, laughing, plotting the next steps. Thomas stood quietly, exhausted but lighter. Janice approached. "You didn't just shut the garage door, Thomas. You shut the door on years of nonsense. It took guts." He shrugged. "I just wanted to park my truck. But if I let her get away..." "With that, what would stop her next time?" Robert raised his voice. "Then let's make it official. Time for new leadership." Cheers broke out again. Sophia walked over, her voice gentle. "Thank you, Thomas. I thought about moving so many times because of her. Tonight reminded me this can still be a good place to raise my kids." Thomas nodded. "I just want a neighborhood where we look out for each other, not fear each other." Slowly the crowd thinned, drifting home with relief and quiet excitement. Thomas lingered in his driveway, finally lowering the garage door on his own terms. In the silence of the night, he knew Patricia's fight wasn't finished, but he wasn't afraid anymore. Tonight had proven a truth. Boundaries matter, respect matters, and when ordinary people stand together, even the loudest bully can be silenced.